In business news today, 3 things to know. First, U.S. President Barack Obama returns to Asia to mend some fences as he begins his week-long four-nation visit. Will it be a kumbaya experience and a game changer for some economies in the Asia-Pacific region? Then, GM takes cover. The beleaguered auto giant is seeking more protection against legal claims for actions prior to its 2009 bankruptcy. And say it ain't so. Are American universities going under? Warnings that many of our institutions of higher learning may fail in the next decade or so. Well, Xchange starts right now. Hello, I'm Julian Phillips in for Andrew Schmertz. Let's get right to our top story. As President Barack Obama begins his week-long four-nation trip to Asia, he'll try to bolster alliances with those nations who see the U.S. as a counterweight to their powerful neighbor, China. And with the U.S. eager to expand its market in Asia, trade and economic issues will also be on that agenda, no doubt. Well, our Washington Bureau Chief James Blue joins us from D.C. with more. Hello, James.
Hi, Julian. How are you?
James, we're talking about the TPP, the 12-Nation Trans-Pacific Partnership. Break it down for us. What does that mean?
Basically, the TPP is an attempt to sort of bind together the 12 large economies in the Pacific region, the U.S., Mexico, Taiwan, Japan, and really try to create a pact that would somehow counter the weight of China. The TPP, if it were to be enacted, would account for about 40% of the world's GDP. And so this is a way for the economies of the Pacific to really try to counter the strength and power of China, which, as you know, Julian, will very soon become the world's largest economy. And this is an attempt to sort of align both the tariffs, the trade rules within those 12 countries, so it'll be easier to move goods from one side of the Pacific to the other.
Absolutely. Of course, China is probably the 800-pound gorilla in the room, but you've got 4 countries now that President Obama is focusing on. You've got Japan, South Korea, Malaysia, and to a lesser degree, the Philippines. But even within these 4 countries, there are some problems, most notably between Japan and South Korea.
Yeah, there are some problems between Japan and South Korea, and those tensions were first addressed in back in March when President Obama held a sort of mini summit between the leaders of Japan and South Korea. Things haven't, completely been patched up, but there certainly is progress being made. The other situation that is facing in terms of tensions in the region, China boarded some Japanese ships that were in a sort of fishing zone that China claims as its own. So the president goes to Japan with some tensions both on the Korea Peninsula and tensions with China sort of at the fore.
James, we've got less than a minute left here. I think the big thing, as far as I can see right now, is how the president is going to try to convince these countries outside of China that most of his interests, or at least for the United States, are not really centered on the Middle East.
Well, the U.S. has tried to do this pivot to Asia. It has been the hallmark of President Obama's foreign policy. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton was a bigger proponent of it. Secretary of State of John Kerry is much more interested in the Middle East peace deal. You now have Syria, you have Ukraine, you have Iran. They are trying to pivot to Asia, but the events around the world are bringing them back to other places. So who knows what's going to happen.
Right. Well, it's one hot mess. But, of course, James Blue, you are all over it. Our Washington Bureau Chief. James, as always, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
The big week for corporate earnings continues. After the bell today, American biotech firm Gilead said it trounced expectations, posting a first-quarter revenue of $5 billion, folks. This puts earnings this quarter at $1.33 per share, beating analyst expectations by more than 40 cents. Gilead's wide profit margin has been attributed to a hepatitis C pill that generated $2.27 billion in sales just this quarter earlier. Global fast food chain McDonald's, those golden arches, recorded a 5.2% drop in first quarter profits, facing competition from growing fast casual chains. It reported earnings of $1.21 a share, about 3 cents below predictions. And media giant Comcast had a strong first quarter. It's reporting $17.4 billion in revenue, which translates to 71 cents a share, beating out the 64-cent estimate. Well, as earning news dominated the market again today, here's how Wall Street closed out the day. Across the board, up. The Dow closed at 16,514, the S&P 500 at 1879, and the NASDAQ ended the day at 4161. Now for a look at commodities. Gold closing down at $1,288.40 an ounce, and oil closing also down at $102.13 per barrel. Let me get that right. As we reported earlier, this is a big week for corporate earnings, and we've witnessed a roller coaster ride for much of this first quarter, no doubt. Here to give us insight into both markets and earnings is our good friend Peter Cardillo, Chief Market Economist for Rockwell Global Capital. My goodness, it's good to see you again.
Good to be back.
The market up and down like a roller coaster. I feel I'm in Coney Island. I've said so many times on the tornado or the cyclone, but yet and still we've gone up today. What do you make of these markets?
Yeah, be not afraid. That's all I can tell you. It's simply because of the fact that, you know, the earnings season, while it's really not all that great, it hasn't been all that bad. And I think it certainly has beaten our expectations. And I think investors are now convinced that even though, you know, maybe 40% of the earnings so far that have been reported have missed their targets, but in general, the larger companies have been beating estimates. And I think the real key to the earnings season here is that even though the companies that missed their earnings, they seem to be upbeat about the coming quarters, and that's key. So if you tie in earnings with the good economic news that we've been getting so far, you know, yesterday we saw the leading indicators come in quite strong, indicative of the second quarter posting some really good growth. Now, that doesn't mean that the third and fourth quarter is going to match what I'm expecting in the second quarter, but the second quarter should be good, and that bodes well for equities.
What about the stock market itself? We've talked, you've been on the show talking about this in terms of corrections, predictions of like anywhere 5 to 7% the first quarter, and maybe anywhere from 10 to 12% over 12 months. Where do we stand there, Peter?
Well, you know, if you look back, this is probably the third time that the correction that we were calling for about 6 to 8% was interrupted. So if you add up the percentage declines of the past three declines that we had within the last 90 days, it probably comes out to about 8%. So with earnings being a bit better than we expected, I think that it's safe to say that the correction is over, or let's call it a pullback if you want.
All right.
And that we're probably going to see this market continue to move on higher. Now, that doesn't mean after 6 days of good gains. In fact, if you look at the transportation averages today, they were very strong.
Right.
And that's a very positive sign for the market in general.
Well, let's talk about something that interests me. You see all these commercials for all these drug companies, a lot of mergers and acquisitions in the pharmaceutical industry. What's going on here? Hey,
you know, M&A has been strong for the past several years, and that's a sign of strength in the sense that companies are willing to pay some pretty hefty numbers. And you saw today's merger news, you know, Averon. And so that's a positive sign, and that's a sign that tells the market we're expecting good economic growth. Usually, you know, when you get to a peak of growth, companies like to consolidate. They like to downsize. But now they're expanding. And as they expand, right, that means that there's hope that the economy is going to do much better going forward.
That's right. And of course, drugs for everybody, Peter. I guess that's what it's all about.
You know, you can't get away with using medical drugs today, and and so it's an industry that is always going to have a sexy story tied to it.
Well, that'll have to be the last word. Peter Cardillo, as always, sir, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
All righty. Coming up, seems like home sales are cooling down, at least on the surface. We'll take a closer look at the latest housing numbers when we come back. You're watching Arise Exchange.
news can definitely be improved when reflecting diversity.
A lot of mainstream news, they don't dive into it.
Who wants to hear about negativity all the time?
They only show what they think people want to know and not what people really should know.
World-based stories. That's what I enjoy the most.
I think diversity of news is important to the world so that everybody will be aware of their surroundings and what is happening today.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Arise Exchange. Two key data reports out today for housing. According to the Federal Housing Finance Agency, home prices increased 0.6% in February on a seasonally adjusted basis, and existing home sales fell slightly by 0.2% in March. But even with a weak showing, the market is a bit firmer than expected. Well, Jeff Tannenbaum from Halstead Property joins us for a look at the latest. Welcome to Arise Exchange.
Thank you, Julie.
This housing market, I think a lot of people are very excited about this. I know even my own neighborhood on Long Island, you see homes going up for sale. Of course, it's a spring ahead, and people are selling their homes. Explain what's going on.
Well, we had a tremendous year in New York, and there were times when I had 68 separate buyers after one open house, 9 offers and 6 above ask.
Wow.
Unbelievable. That was several months ago. I think the market is cooling. Okay. I see some pricing going down as opposed to everything going up. I don't see as much bidding war as we used to have, if you will.
Why is this?
Well, we have a double-edged sword. We have low inventory, which is great for the seller.
Right.
It bolsters the prices that are higher, but then it also shuts out a substantial portion of the buyer market because they throw their hands up. I can't compete. I can't afford to pay these prices.
So we've got a no mas amongst potential buyers now. No mas.
Exactly.
Okay.
So eventually, I mean, in New York, in Manhattan, we are insulated. We have people with money who are buying substantial priced apartments, co-op condo, townhouses, whatever. If we look at the rest of the country, that's not the case.
And that is the key that I'm concerned about. And Jeff, more so, I'm concerned about the banks, what they're going to do. Right now, interest rates are still relatively low.
Relatively low.
And how long can we expect this to take
I've spoken with several mortgage brokers who I have confidence in, and through the summer, through fall, we should pretty much see the interest rates hover around where they are now. And as most of this country is risk adverse and prefers the 30-year fix, they plan on living there forever, having their children there, their grandchildren, they want to know every month what they're paying. So the 30-year fixed is the dominant mortgage product. We should probably see that staying low 4s, hopefully, and maybe as we approach the latter part of the year, I'm hearing it might go to the mid-4s.
Interesting. And that's still relatively low.
It's still relatively low.
But my concern also, and I think what might be a bargaining chip for all this, I guess, or leverage, are new housing starts. Where do they stand right now?
Well, there was an issue with new housing starts because as much as one might not think this would be entering into the mix, the labor for the new housing starts was more of an issue recently with all the border controls because of cheap labor, in all fairness, coming into the country, which helps to create a less expensive product, if you will, and help investors to get their projects up and running.
Right.
So again, my specialty being Manhattan, we have a substantial number of holes in the ground. I've just sold 2 pieces of land to investors who want to build condo, retail first floor, condo above.
I'm upset because I didn't get my cut, Jeff.
You will. We haven't closed it on that one. But ultimately, in other parts of the country, the starts are slower, these holes, if you will, as I call them, because where investors go, it usually is where there's cheaper product, and with prices being higher, they're less willing to part with their money. Because everything's going to spiral and be higher for them.
Money is always a factor here. Of course, we've run out of time, but I'll tell you what I'm going to do for cheaper housing starts. I'm going to call in Paul Bunyan, chop down a few trees, and make my own log cabins.
We'll do it together.
Jeff Tannenbaum, thank you
Pleasure
so much, sir.
Thank you so much.
Fantastic. Time now for our business ticker, stories making news around the world. U.S. Vice President Joe Biden had sharp words for Russia as he visited Ukraine today, saying they must stop talking and start acting to defuse the crisis there. Meeting with acting Ukrainian President Oleksandr Turchinov and other leaders in Kiev, Biden said further provocative behavior would lead to greater isolation. This after more violence in eastern Ukraine by pro-Russian forces who have yet to relinquish their hold on government buildings and other installations. And topping all this, the murder of a local politician. Ukraine has promised to reactivate anti-terrorist military operations in the eastern part of the country. Meanwhile, the EU is divided on further economic sanctions, but the U.S. has pledged millions more in aid for political and economic reforms, as well as funds to help run the presidential elections there in May. Well, imagine finding out that when your parent or guardian has passed away, all of your student loans are due immediately. Well, that's reality facing a lot of post-grads. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau says it's received complaints about the practice called auto default, where a cosigner dies or files for bankruptcy and the loan agency demands a borrower repay the full balance immediately, even if they've never missed a payment. That's not good news. Well, it looks like the party in the pouch is over. Earlier this month, the U.S. Alcohol and Tobacco Tax and Trade Bureau approved the sale of palcohol, or powdered alcohol you can carry around in a pouch. That's right. You could just give, okay, guys in the crew, they're going crazy, about any liquid from your sports drink to your morning smoothie, an extra kick just with a little sprinkle. Well, parents of high schoolers across the country naturally got up in arms at the idea, and the Bureau now says the earlier approval was an error. Well, the Cuban government has created a currency caste system imposing different social conditions to the population, divided among those who have convertible pesos and those who don't. Arise News' Roni Corvello has this special report from Havana, Cuba.
The Cuban government is still looking for ways to get rid of the economic rut they dug themselves in. About 6 months ago, President Raúl Castro announced that he will unify the two local currencies. The national pesos is used by Cubans for their daily shopping and can be exchanged for 25 to $1. And the CUC, which is the money used by tourists, has an artificial value set by the government at 10% premium over the dollar.
Es imprescindible para la economía cubana.
The Cuban economy to make this decision a task which has been scheduled under the current economy plan. We hope that this D-Day comes and the change occur.
They don't know how and when the unification will happen, but everyone here hopes that can be the beginning of the end of social inequality, created by the economic model implemented by the Castro brothers in the last 56 years.
Es una cosa positiva.
This is a positive decision by the government. It's something that it has not been able to do for the last 50 years. I hope other changes come forward and our life improves.
The government, little by little, is putting in action a series of economic reforms. But as of right now, the single currency is still a faraway dream for the majority of the population.
Pero positivamente nos va a permitir hacer exámenes.
Taking into consideration the characteristics of the Cuban peso and how it is used in this economy, it won't be an easy task, but it is necessary serious repair work. We're now evaluating the fixed and intangible assets in accordance with the structures given.
According to the United Nations World Food Program, a Cuban family spends about 60 to 70% of their income on food. The average salary is 360 Cuban pesos, which is equivalent to $15 per month.
It's not easy for those whom hasn't the CUC. They can take advantage of any of the announced economic changes, like buy a car, a house, travel, talk on the cellular, or even have a cell phone. Ronnie Corvello on a special assignment from Havana, Cuba, Arise News.
He's got to be the most interesting man in the world. Corvulo, I love it. Anyway, ahead, the latest on General Motors and the auto industry, from the showroom to the boardroom. You're watching Arise Xchange, of course.
Because we live in a global, interconnected world, business news no longer stops when the markets close on Wall Street. And what we've discovered over the past few years of the financial crisis is that events and news that happen even in the smallest countries impact the United States and the world at large. As we bring together experts and analysts and thought leaders and CEOs and companies across many industries to not only provide the macroeconomic view, but news everyday people can use.
Well, the New York Auto Show is seeing some of the latest and greatest in American car manufacturing. While it's great fun and high spirits overall, it's clear that each company is facing its own set of triumphs as well as challenges. General Motors is pressing for protection from liability for accidents before its bankruptcy and restructuring drama in 2009. Meanwhile, American rival Ford is expected to appoint Mark Fields as the new CEO. Well, the car coach Lauren Fix joins us now with more. Hey, Lauren.
Hey, Julian.
You know, this whole thing now with GM and trying to restructure things prior to their 2009 bankruptcy, how do you think this is going to go?
Well, my real concern is for that of us, the taxpayer. If it looks, this is the most unconventional bankruptcy that's ever been done in history. And if you talk to any attorneys or people that are bankruptcy experts, they'll tell you that this is not usual that you pressure a judge to get this job done. Usually there's a lot of due diligence that needs to be done. And because of that, it was done unconventionally and quite quickly. I have a sinking feeling that the protections will not be in place. They were only people that made out in this bankruptcy are the unions and funding their retirement accounts. And my concern is that if there is any legalities that are left because they do find what it looks like they're going to find that they did know about, faulty switches, not changing part numbers, not following standard quality control procedures that are standard in the industry or actually any industry, looks like the taxpayer is going to end up footing the bill on this, and that's not good because we've already footed the bill to get them out of bankruptcy and took a loss in the process.
Right. We're going to keep our eye on this. Let's move on here to Ford. First, of course, Mary Barra taking over GM, and she received a beating on Capitol Hill hearings. Now we've got Mark Fields as the new head of Ford. Tell me about the selection.
Well, actually, I think Mark Fields is an excellent suggestion. He spent 2 years turning around Mazda. Now, Mazda was really struggling, especially in other countries. He's turned the brand around, and recently they've won a bunch of awards for the Mazda 3, the MX-5. I mean, their vehicles have really turned around, not just in quality, crash testing, and their numbers have popped as well. So I think that Mark Fields is an excellent choice. I mean, look at what he's been able to accomplish, plus he understands how Mullally operates. He's been in the meetings knowing that this is the way we do things. There's no one skirting issues, no one sweeping things under the rug, and Mullally's very straightforward. And his success is something that Mark Fields has learned from being there. You're not bringing another outsider in with another perspective. We're bringing someone who's going to continue this process and take on two big transitions, which is the Mustang and its 50th birthday.
You know, I was just about to say about that, Lauren. The 50th anniversary of the Mustang, I mean, that is a great muscle car of all time.
Yes, I have a bunch of the older cars. I even named my daughter Shelby, so I'm pretty addicted to the car. but they really did a great job at the New York Auto Show. They brought a Mustang to the top of the Empire State Building as they did in 1964.
Right.
They went back to the World's Fairground in Flushing Meadows in Queens and did a big celebration there as well as all over the world in major cities. And I was at the one in Charlotte with Mark Fields.
Right.
He flew commercial. I have to give the guy credit. And he flew all the way to Las Vegas and then back to Detroit. So that's a long day for one person.
Okay, and we're taking a look at that now. Of course, they had to cut that car up into like 4 or 5 different pieces to get it up there. Let's go quickly now. Gas prices are rising right now. What can we look forward to, especially with the New York Auto Show and the kinds of cars that are popular and are selling now in less than 60 seconds?
Well, what we're looking at is the price of gasoline getting closer to $4 a gallon. Again, we have not seen that in the past. Analysts are expecting that we're going to see $4 a gallon by the summer. With fuel economy on cars improving, we're hoping that it won't be as much of an impact. My big concern is that consumers won't forget to take care of their vehicles. April is National Car Care Month.
All right, Lauren Fix, I guess it's getting spring right now. Get that convertible ready, or that Shelby Cobra, and we're going to go for a ride, my friend, on the Iconic when you get into town.
Absolutely.
All right, Lauren, thanks a lot.
Take care.
Next, tough times ahead for college campuses across the country. We'll tell you what they're up against after the break. You're watching Arise Exchange.
I think media and reporters have a lot to answer for.
AIDS, hunger, people not having running water, the things that we just take for granted.
I think the most important issues in the world today are education and poverty.
Terrorism and war, I guess, is always. It's always an issue, and the quality of life of certain groups of people in certain areas.
I think inequality.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back. It seems the winds of change are swirling around institutions of higher learning, and not necessarily for the better. Enrollment is dropping, while at the same time college graduates are having a harder time finding jobs. Add huge student loan debts into the mix, and this may be a recipe for disaster that has colleges fighting to stay alive. Mark Schneider, Vice President at the American Institutes for Research, joins us now on the phone. Mark, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
First, I want to start off just a little end around here. The Supreme Court upholds the Michigan affirmative action issue. What's your take on this whole thing?
Many years ago, the Supreme Court ruled that affirmative action in college admissions was going to be a temporary, necessary but temporary strategy. They said 20 years maybe, and I think we're seeing that people are finished with affirmative action, or many people are finished with affirmative action in college admissions. The people of Michigan voted not to enforce it. The Supreme Court by 6-2 said that was okay, that this was part of the democratic process, and they found no problem with the referendum.
All right. Okay. We'll see whether or not this springboards to other states around the country. Let's focus now on these dwindling admissions for colleges here. We've got three things: soaring student debts, online programs, and poor job prospects. Recipe for disaster here. Some say maybe half of the 4,000 colleges and universities may be a thing of the past in 15 years. That's dire. What are your thoughts on this?
So most of the colleges that are in danger are small. Many of them have very specific missions. Some of them are religious-based. They grew up in the 60s to satisfy the needs of different denominations. Their business models just don't work anymore. They're charging $40,000 a year. They're totally dependent on tuition. Their students are coming out with large debt. They're coming out with very poor job prospects. In Virginia, for example, the average first-year earnings for many graduates from these very expensive not-for-profit schools are about $20,000, $25,000. It's not a recipe for success, especially as the number of students in the pipeline goes down. The traditional age students are declining, and everybody's much more value conscious now about higher education. In fact, if you go to Google and you start "is college," and they always suggest what the words that you're thinking about next based on what is most common. It says you type in "is college," and the first thing that shows up is college worth it.
All right, so we're looking at some schools here. I know, because Ashland College of Dowling College out here on Long Island in New York City, you're having a lot of people that are not going. Where are our kids going now? Are they going to some of the bigger schools now? I mean, I'm a Big Ten guy. I'm a Purdue guy. I love it. I love the Big Ten. Is that where a lot of the students are going now, to bigger schools?
Well, some of the bigger schools, some of the flagships, Purdue, Stony Brook. I mean, they're pretty much.
Don't put Purdue and Stony Brook together, please.
but oh, come on.
All right.
Anyway, but the point is that I taught at Stony Brook for a long time. So
okay.
Anyway, the fact is that they're going into regional campuses, which have a lot more space. SUNY Delhi, for example, or Fredonia. There's room in those schools. They're going online. Increasingly online. And then there's a whole question about whether or not you need a 2-year degree or a 4-year degree. There are different solutions to the problem of getting a bachelor's degree from a no-name, very expensive private school.
Well, I got to tell you, Mark, we've kind of run out of time here, but the bottom line to me is I don't think this is a really good thing for America. I mean, small colleges are places where people could go to get a quality education, and it seems that everybody can't survive at a big school or will be accepted to a bigger school. So I
want to just back up for a second. So a lot of these schools,
real quickly.
A lot of these schools were okay. They weren't great. These are the schools that are in trouble are no-name not-for-profits. Very few of them are schools that anybody would recognize. You know, they may have a local reputation. I mean, Dowling College. I taught at Stony Brook, and I said, Dowling, why would anybody spend, $30,000 a year to go there when they can go to Stony Brook for $8,000?
Look, that'll be an argument for another day. I tend to disagree with you a little bit, but Mark, but I'll tell you what, there's some good points here, and I hope these colleges do survive. Anyway, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
All right, thanks for watching Arise Exchange. I'm Julian Phillips. Angela Schmertz will be back tomorrow. Another look at the markets up and across the board. The Dow closed at 165.14, 1879 S&P, and the NASDAQ 4161. See you later.